community advocate that focuses on social and economic justice. Today, I am Atalia Armstrong, a lifelong Trentonian and a community advocate that focuses on social and economic justice. Today, I am tasked with presenting on the third principle known as UJIMA. UJIMA means collective work and responsibility to build and maintain our communities holistically, identifying and solving our problems together. In the spirit of UJIMA, we have a collective work and responsibility to secure our social, political, and economic standing here in the United States. The only way to secure our social, political, and economic position is to work together. So that means it doesn't matter your current income position, if you earn 6 figures or receive unemployment. That means it doesn't matter if you own a home or rent, if you are formally educated or not, if you have children or not, if you own a business or just a consumer. It doesn't matter your individual position. What matters is what we do collectively, what we secure, and to whom and what we take responsibility for right now, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. Social capital, the networks of relationships among people who live and work in a particular society, enabling that society to function effectively. Political capital refers to the goodwill, trust, and influence that politicians earn or build up with the public through the pursuit of policies. It is then possible to use this capital to push through unpopular legislation without severely damaging their support across the board. Economic capital, the amount of capital that a community needs to survive any risk it takes. All three are necessary to a group's survival, and all three represents the principle of UJIMA, because we need a collective body and an understanding of responsibility to effectively utilize all three. So what is social capital? Social capital for our community means strengthening networks that expands and broadens social norms to be tolerant, accepting, and understanding of our cultural, traditional, and historical being. Authentically widening our collective and collaborative resources within and outside of communities, strengthening our social access to society as a whole, and allows us to restore and build relationships where each stands to gain something for the betterment of the community. It's about helping each other out, sharing our networks, our information, our access to people, places, and things. This should be done not for a select few, but for the whole of the group. UJIMA. Economic capital. Rebuilding our communities will take investment in both people and community. Wealth, the total sum of your assets minus liabilities. Our economic position here in the United States remains our biggest barrier, and it isn't because of some individual failure to socially thrive. No, it is strictly because we were enslaved and then immediately disenfranchised politically, socially, and economically current day. We remain tethered to things of the past in a way that no other group is. Economists predict African Americans' wealth position will drop to 0 by 2053. In New Jersey, white households' median collective positioning in wealth is $352,000, and per person, the wealth is $107,000. Whereas African Americans' collective wealth is $6,000, and per person, it is $179. What does all of that mean? It means that we will become a permanent underclass in the country our ancestors built. It means that we will have nothing to compete with within this society. But we can change this by utilizing the principle of UJIMA and advocating specifically as a group based upon our historical and current positioning here in the United States. Political capital. There are two kinds of political capital: representative and reputational capital. Representative capital has more to do with influence, whereby The other is more of credibility and reliability. Both are needed to mobilize the people, achieve policy reforms, and accomplish other political goals. This is weighing thin within the African American community because our political capital has historically benefited others, and that is not in keeping with the principle of Ujima. We are to take responsibility and utilize our collective works to promote and sustain a healthier community whereby we can effectively live, work, and play together. A great example of political capital would be the Reconstruction era. The Reconstruction era lasted from 1865 to 1877. Some may ask, why is the Reconstruction era so important? It is important because it is the only time in history whereby the movement towards a more perfect union stood the strongest chance to be realized. It is a time where, after years of enslavement, African Americans were granted basic rights such as citizenship and voting rights. A time that essentially placed African Americans smack dab in the middle of the political arena just months after being legally freed from the institution of slavery, whereby their collective works allowed them to utilize their newly found influence to garner and gain constitutional amendments that we all live under today. The Reconstruction era, although short-lived, is a prime example of what working together in unity for the betterment of our communities looks like. Ujima. The Civil Rights era. Like its predecessor, the Civil Rights Movement is another example of what unity and collective works can garner. It is what it looks like when we take responsibility for our collective positioning and demand our fair share of resources for our communities. The Civil Rights Movement more or less took what was gained during the Reconstruction era so many years ago and strengthened it. A picking up of the ball, if you will. Just like the Reconstruction era, we gained economic, social, and political capital during a time when we were disenfranchised the most. What does all that mean? Well, it means that we can do whatever we put our collective minds to do. But in this game, we cannot drop the ball. Dropping the ball because we experience some small successes means to fall behind and forever play catch up. Forever having to rebuild and restore. No, in this game, we have to understand the assignment and teach it to each generation. Symbolism, elections, and outcomes. Every 4 years, we elect a president for the United States. It is our civic duty to ensure we are assessing each candidate in a critical way. For our failure to do so, for our failure not to specifically advocate can have severe consequences that often negatively add to our plight instead of positively advancing it. Elections have consequences. It is what it is. But for the African American community, a community that has been through so much, both past and present, we have to get serious about what it means to be gifted symbolism and what it means to have impactful policies that will begin to address our current positioning here in the United States. Every 4 years, we get acknowledgement of cultural heritage and experiences. It is on full display during election seasons. But it hasn't translated into anything of substance, such as policies. It hasn't translated into procedures and practices to change, whereby we are not jailed en masse, whereby we are not murdered by police, sent to protect and serve, whereby we are not having to constantly fight for and explain our humanity. President William Clinton was touted as the first Black president. Hindsight allows us to see how incredibly irresponsible that was. Today, we can see how deleterious the 1994 crime bill was. We can now see what it looks like when resources are in place to combat the problem versus what it looks like when we criminalize the problem. Juxtapose the crack era against the opioid crisis of today. Our failure during that time was not utilizing the principle of Ujima, not using our collective works and responsibilities to care for our communities in a way that would have demanded a swift, specific, and uplifting response from our government to our collective plight. President Barack Obama, our first Black president, His presidency was one filled with hope, determination, and progression. Yet African Americans lost wealth under his tenure. This is not to evaluate President Obama's presidency, but to indicate a political pattern whereby our demands are not specific nor intentional to our economic and social burgeoning here in the United States. Barack Obama's presidency also unveils what our collective works can secure and also what it can precariously abandon. When we work together, both within and outside of our communities, we were able to elect our first Black president to the highest seat in the land. We can also see what happens when we don't remain consistently responsible and accountable, when we fail to work together. We see what we can lose. President Joseph Biden, our current commander-in-chief. His election is what it looks like when we remain unaccountable and not responsible for our economic, political, and social standing here in the United States. The election of President Biden was yet another election by which African Americans saved everyone but themselves. Walking away from the 2020 election having gained nothing of substance, no policies that would begin to move the societal needle towards not only justice but progress. African American people have not had specific legislation to address our plight since 1965. All three are great examples of what it looks like when we work together and when we don't. For we elect these people to these positions and then we fall back in our demands. But if we use the principle of Ujima constantly and consistently, we can make a powerful, long-lasting impact for our communities. The fight is never ending. We can never let our guard down. We can never forget. Instead, we must not only utilize the examples of the past, we must build upon them. Sustaining and solidifying our social, political, and economic position here in the United States. In this way, we make certain that our political, economic, and social foundations aren't in need of constant rehabilitation every 4 years. In this way, we make certain our political, economic, and social foundations are so strongly and solidly built that the next generation not only stands firmly and squarely upon them, no amount of weight placed upon it will crumble it. This is in keeping with the spirit of Ujima, and our practice thereof can take us places our ancestors never dreamed of. I leave you with, we are our ancestors' dreams. We can do whatever we put our minds to, but we cannot do it alone. We must do it together. I am Atalia Armstrong, and I thank you for this time. Ujima.